This is your first time taking notes here on elements of a story. So you guys will notice in your graphic organizer that you've got 5 spots for 5 parts of a story and then 5 places to define what those words mean. The third column on your notes says examples from Gertrude Grew Great, and we won't do that until tomorrow in class. So you're going to leave that third column blank. Okay? So, definition of a short story is it just tells about a single event or an experience. It's fictional, which means it's not true. So you guys hear fiction or nonfiction, and fiction means not true. And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you guys really think of any fiction that you have read, any stories that you have read, they all have beginnings, middles, and ends. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we start reading. The 5 elements of a story. First of all, every short story has a plot. Every short story has characterization. They have conflicts. They have a setting. And they have a theme. So if you look at your notes, underneath the 5 parts of a story, you should be able to write those 5 things or type those 5 things in now. And now I'm going to go through and define each one of these things for you. So first of all, the plot. That's the first part of a story. This kind of goes along with that every story has a beginning, middle, and end. So the plot is the main events of a story. And the plot has 5 parts to it. So if you think we've talked about 5 parts of a story, the plot has 5 parts also. So 5 can be our favorite number today. So the first part of the plot is the introduction. The next part's the rising action. And then you have the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So every short story that you read will follow that pattern. They will all have an introduction, a rising action, a climax, a falling action, and a resolution. As well as when you guys start writing your own short stories, they will have those 5 things in that order also. The next story element that we'll talk about here is characterization. And that's just the traits of a character. So it's like how does a character act? What do they look like? What kind of personality do they have? All of that stuff is characterization. So when you think about when you're done reading a story, you usually know quite a bit about a character, and that's because the author used characterization to tell you about them. The next story element that we'll talk about is conflict. So conflict is a struggle between opposing forces. Now, typically a lot of the times it's 2 characters that are arguing with each other or having some type of conflict. But it can be other things too. It can be like the characters having a conflict with nature, themselves, society, technology, and we'll talk about all those things as we get more into the story elements. And then the second to last story element we're going to talk about is setting. And that is just when and where the story takes place. So when you are done reading a book, you can also tell us when and where it took place. And that's because the author has given you a setting. And lastly, we have theme. And the theme is the meaning or the lesson of the story. Now, the author is not going to tell you at the end, unless you're reading a fable, the author is not going to tell you at the end, this is the moral of the story. Instead, the reader kind of has to infer what the theme is or what the moral of the story is. And it's kind of, I like to think of it as bubblegum. It's kind of what sticks with you and when you're done reading. So what lesson can you learn as the reader from the character? So just a quick review here. Our 5 elements of a story. So every short story is going to have a plot, characterization, conflict, setting, and theme. So you should have some good information there to fill in the beginning of your notes. Remember the Gertrude Grew Great column will stay blank until tomorrow. If you need to rewind, stop, pause, whatever you need to do, this is set up for you to do that. So whatever speed you need to go at, whatever works for you, and you should be able to get your notes filled in. All right, we'll talk tomorrow. Bye.